of the blacks. The trouble started when they hit the Mason-Dixon line. The conductor came back into the car and announced that all the black people had to come up and sit in the front car. My father didn't realize what was happening until he was ushered into a car with all white people. Terrified, he broke from the conductor and ran back to the Jim Crow car, where he felt safe. The conductor came after him and escorted him back into the car up front, assuring him no one would hurt him. This was my father's introduction to the North, and speaks to the severe impact of Southern brutality toward blacks at that time. The fact that my father felt unsafe on the train even though he was headed north seems almost ludicrous now. He put his age up to 16, which was easy at that time since there were no birth certificates of slaves or their children, and joined the Army, which became part of the 10th Cavalry that fought in the Spanish-American War and charged San Juan Hill with Teddy Roosevelt. He was honorably discharged from San Francisco Presidio in 1906, just before the earthquake fire. So let me go down. I want to get over here. I have 5 bloods running through my veins, and I respect them all. They have served me well. I have been blessed with African and Indian blood, which gave me character and strength. The other 3 bloods have softened the blows and kept me balanced in a world designed to make me bitter and angry. And I talk about how I worked as a little child at 10 years old, pulling my little rank, selling the Louisiana Weekly. It's a nickel, so they got 3 cents and I kept 2. I remember I had this little book. I was just keeping my little pennies. Anyway, I was only 10 years old and I made the rounds of the neighborhood. Never a child, I used to sit in the living room talking politics with the elders while the other children played outside. Somebody else told me that. I didn't know. Anyway, this goes to what I was talking to Lola about, and I think I didn't get to tell her about this, but as a result, I've been blessed with a feeling of, I have always felt connected to something bigger than myself. I could neither see it or hear it, but I could feel it. It was separate from my mother and father, yet it was a feeling of warmth and protection. As day-to-day problems of growing up began to take over, I was subconsciously aware that I could call on an inner presence when needed. The inner awareness grew with me over the years, and one day I would realize the protection it gave me in times of crisis. It never interfered with the life process. I made mistakes, felt pain, went my own way, but it was always there to fall back on. As a result, I have been blessed with a feeling of comfort, solitude without being lonely, being held in a time of pain, a feeling of being loved unconditionally. So growing up black during the Great Depression, I felt rich. I go on to tell, and I'm going to read this because I'm going to tell you about my exhibit in Japan. Here's when I'm very young. You see, God places you in all these things, and unless you connect them, and you live long enough, you don't even know what the lessons are or how they're going to come back. So I want to read this to you because I'll be telling you about my next career. During this time in less affluent communities, this is down in West Oakland now, economics, not race, decided who your neighbor was. So we grew up next to Portuguese, Italians, Japanese, Chinese, Irish, Polish, Germans, and Greeks. I remember meeting Senator Nicholas Petras, of Greek extraction, many years later when I was working for the California State Legislature. I worked for Byron Rumford when he was elected assembly. While having dinner one night, I mentioned being born on 7th and Union Streets, way down West Oakland. Nick bet me he lived further down than me. He won. Nick lived in 7th and Wood, and that's way down. Way down. I showed that, and Nick has this book, and he loves that part of it. Way down. He's over at Piedmont Gardens right now. Yeah. So I was born inside a little United Nations and didn't know it at the time. It was an introduction to the world at large, and that exposure would allow me to move with ease among other races for the rest of my life. If there was a plus for black children growing up in that kind of neighborhood, this is West Oakland before it was ghettoized. Before racial ghettos set in, it was friendships developed that would last a lifetime. And I'll tell you about one I've recently found when I get into my new career. I called him up, grew up with him in Berkeley, Japanese. We haven't seen each other since 1939, and we're going to reunite on the stage in the program you're all going to be invited to. Okay. When the Japanese were interned during World War II, we were one of the many families that moved from our home and moved into a Japanese home to take care of it while they were away. We took pictures of their home and garden regularly to let them know that everything was being maintained as they would have wanted. That has never appeared in the press anywhere. Nobody ever knows about it. Because they were ashamed to say that Americans disapproved of putting these people away. And they were confiscating their land, all their nurseries, and wouldn't give it back. So these people came around and had formed a group and said, guess what? If we don't move into their homes, they're not going to have any homes to come back. They get ready to take their homes. And we all moved out of our houses, hundreds of people. And they never mentioned it, and nobody ever knows about it. Anyway, my first little friend in Berkeley was Shigeru Morita, who lived next door. He taught me early on how to count Japanese. I just found him again last week.
Wow.
And he's coming over for tea, and he's going to be at our event that I'll be telling you about. Wonderful guy. And he remembered McGee Avenue, and that we used to, every single day we played together. Anyway, he taught me to count 10. He taught me early on how to count 10 in Japanese. So I said, Ichi ni gan sanchi so go, I can't. Ichi ni sanchi go loco hichi hachi kuju. So he broke out laughing. We had a lot of fun. Anyway, there was only 2,000 black people in Berkeley at that time. So my father soon became a community leader. I don't know if anybody knows Francis Allbrier and Matt Crawford. Anybody knows his name?
Yeah.
And who knows them?
Me.
All right, you know who they were. My father was
The South Berkeley Community Church.
That was the trio. He started see, they don't tell you these things. Matt Turner, Matt Crawford started the co-op in Berkeley that you heard about.
Yeah.
The co-op, and then he started something else. I forget what it was, but he put a lot of good stuff in Berkeley that white people enjoy today, and they never know who the black man started for him. But Matt Crawford was incredible. Anyway, during 1930, the Great Depression, I was 5 years old. It was a suburb with only about 2,000 people, black people living there. My father soon became a community leader. And back in those days, you lived together because of need, not race. That was the issue. So people were coming to meetings to our house were not only black, but German, Swedish, Italian, Polish, Irish, and Jewish. There were no jobs, and people were unable to pay their rent or buy food. Many of them were recent immigrants who were not yet fluent in the English language. There were no food banks back then, no soup lines. There was no organized effort to get food to people. Just an inadequate welfare program that could not take care of all of those in need. Well, Papa, being a leader in the community, he knew the chief of police. They go up and introduce themselves. This is who I am, So Papa knew the chief of police very well, so he called him up one day and told him that unless food was brought to the families in the flat lands of Berkeley, the men were going to march on the supermarket at Ashby and Sacramento Streets in Berkeley, break the windows, and take the food. This is never going to make the papers. They did not want to do it, my father said, being law-abiding citizens, but they and their families were starving. This is what was happening. We were really sorry. And you didn't go to a food bank to go get all that good food you get now. I can remember very plainly one morning when a police car drove up in front of our house on Ashby Avenue, and the policeman dropped off large cartons of groceries on our front porch. The scene was repeated all over Berkeley, and a real food riot was avoided. We found out later the money came from the people in the hills. There were only a few, the Berkeley Hills now, 1,000 houses up there? Only about 100. But they said, no, we don't need this in Berkeley. They sent that money to the police department, they bought that food, and my dad gave them a list, and they went around and fed all these people. Of all different, it wasn't just a black community. See, that was the difference. Anyway, that was one of the things I wanted to tell you about, because they never tell us the truth if it's good. If somebody averted a race riot. If you had a race riot, then they'd put that in the papers. But nobody ever said that these guys, a cop car came up and left cartons of food on people. So wouldn't we like to see that today? Anyway, I just want to give you a paragraph about how you can be educated, but you can also be smart and not go to high school or college. A lot of dumb people come out of college, as you well know. They never put the thing together. But my father was a self-educated man, as he had only finished the 6th grade. He read much and loved politics. He loved showing me the difference between intelligence and book learning. One questions, he used to say, while the other simply regurgitates. Papa's one concern was to teach me to think for myself, even if I disagreed with him. He taught me to question everything. If I read a newspaper, what was the editorial policy? Who wrote the article? What were the politics of the columnist? If it was a book, who was the author and why did he write the book? This was all very challenging stuff for a girl of 14. Mama, on the other hand, hated politics. The only real arguments she and Papa had were on his political associations. She just stayed at home with the kids. That's what she was. Mama was always home, never belonged to organizations or clubs. She lived only for her children, and I can never remember coming home from school when my mother wasn't there. What a safe harbor that was during these crucial years of growing up. It gave me a sense of security and the feeling that if I ever fell, someone would always be there to catch me. And there always was.
Yes.
I read this because I work with a group of women. They sort of, I have a circle. And they all, it's a certain age, it's the 50s, where they wake up, they've done all the, wake up one morning and they've done everything. Let's see, I got $100,000 a year job, actually make that much. They have good cars, they got a husband, kids in college. They wake up one day and they say, I'm not happy.
Exactly.
Wow.
I'm empty. I said, well, when they come to me, I said, well why would you take everything you read in the paper that the white man said would make you happy when that's one of the saddest guys in the world? He doesn't know who he is, and he has to keep a thumb on us to even stay happy. I said, why wouldn't you just go inside and find out and say, like we used to do, what makes you happy? If I went to my dad, he'd say, what's me? When I told him I got an A in my typing class, he didn't have a lot of money, but in about a week, he saved up his little dimes and pennies, whatever it was. A typewriter was sitting on the table when I came home. I walked in the room, there's a typewriter. See, that's what, and I noticed the hugging we did here today. I think we don't understand what hugging does.
Exactly.
One of these girls is depression, and I finally realized that's the beginning of bipolar. You know what she told me? She said, Jerry, I had to go into therapy to find out. My mother never hugged me. She said, I tried to trace all of my problems back. I never felt loved because my mother wouldn't hug me. And I saw you hugging here, and I know that we as a race do that. We don't realize that when every time we've hugged everybody, because remember, nobody thinks we ever do anything important. But while they're not hugging, we're doing the most important thing in the world. I want you to know that the things that we have done have kept us alive for 300 years.
Yeah.
When you read the right books, those slave masters had it all worked out. We were going to live one generation, poor food, and they're going to get the best food, and God has fixed it. The chitlins were more important than the other parts of the pig. The yam, they wanted the white potato. They gave us the one with all the calories. So that's what God does. He reverses it. So we ate all this stuff. We didn't die. And now we're still, we read about us in the paper living all this. So what I'm saying is God has been with us all the way, even though we didn't do it. We do a little thing like hugging. I said, I thank God for the many times I could jump on my mom's lap and she'd wrap her arms around me. And I said, Mom, why do I have such kinky hair? And she said, you're beautiful. No matter, every time I told her that. I said, well, it hurts when you comb it. She said, I know it hurts, but. So I'm saying we've underestimated ourselves because there's nothing very positive that we do that's ever put in there unless it's doing what we're told to do, like shaking our booty, and bringing money in and doing the things that. But when we do these little things that we think are unimportant, they're not unimportant. And if I could only say that to everybody to go home and hug some extra people. And if you see somebody in the street, sometimes I see people and they say, well, I saw you on TV or something. We hug as if she's like me, she's the same person I am. It doesn't matter what color they are, because this is the reason people are shooting each other. When black people start shooting each other in the street, ought to know better. They were hugged, I hope. And then we've underestimated ourselves because nobody has told us how fantastic we really are. So here we are 300 years later, and we're here, and we were never supposed to live past one generation, as it was planned, that our children would carry on the slavery, and they wouldn't have to worry about us asking for anything. See? So as you read these books that people are writing and telling you these things, we knew you have to get that it's very hard to feel important in a country that from the time you were the 4th grade, you were told you were unimportant. It's very hard for all of us. And I'm sure all of us carry a little bit around here, but if that sadness, if you understand what was done to you, why it was done to you, you go see Lincoln, you'll find out, maybe, I haven't seen the picture, but
Yeah.
they gotta tell the truth about why they really ended slavery. It was because the North was gonna go broke and the South was gonna have all the cheap labor.
Yeah.
So they wasn't doing us any favors, but
Mhm.
I'm saying to you, if you understand all this, that's what makes you more human, because you don't go around angry. When you go around, you don't realize what anger does to you. The people that we see many times that get sick, it's because you made yourself sick because the white man did something to you that hurt. If you know who you are, he can't do that. And my favorite saying is, you know, we studied the metaphysics and science of mind. Everything that comes out of your mouth, they have never told you. It's gonna come back to you. I wanna be sick? Oh, okay. Your body says she wants to be sick,
Right.
and you're the master of your body. But they never told us that. So I have this thing where I said, when a white man ever calls me a nigger, I'm gonna look at him and smile. Well, you know what? That's your word. You said it, so it belongs to you. It doesn't mean it doesn't belong to me. I didn't call you a nigger. So
Exactly.
therefore, you know what? You look like a nice man. You don't look like a nigger. You look like a very nice white man to me. I don't know why you're calling yourself a nigger. You see, you got to turn their stuff back on them. But if we only knew these things, you have to grow up and read and read and read and read to find out they're the ones that sick. Anybody that would do to the Indian what they did,
Thank you.
poison them with the blankets, and then when they didn't die fast enough, they said, "Oh, well, we're going to give you a banquet of food, a big dinner," and poison the food. And these are the people that welcomed them and said, "Let's get together. We'll show you how to
Yeah.
grow the food."
Yeah.
Now we have no food. It's fake food because we didn't listen to the Indians.
Yeah, okay.
You see what I mean? God ain't sleeping, you know,
Wow.
and so we can't even get decent food. So I'm saying to you, the sins of that person are coming down on them, and now our time is coming. So I say the Mayan calendar, I welcome that because that's the end of the world as we knew it, and our time is just now coming. And so I think that you're going to see the things that became so hard and difficult to do, going to be a little easier to do. This is what somebody said something about the 2013. It really is true. I think that nice things are going to happen for us, but we first have to go back and feel that pain, because we endured it, and we have to. Anyway, I put here, the strength and love I received from that solid base of family would carry me through many pitfalls and repeated attempts to make me feel less than I was. Certainly by the time I got into television. So I just talk about Byron Rumford being my first mentor, and marrying young, and having my children. I have a few things I thought I was going to write 2 or 3 pages on motherhood. Now, would anybody be interested in motherhood here? Anybody,
Yes.
what? Would anybody be interested in hearing a little bit of the motherhood that I talked about in this book?
Oh,
I'll
certainly.
tell you why I thought that would be important, is because that's where so much goes wrong. The things that, so I'm going to tell you something I didn't know. It's like I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never had any kids, and I said it was trial and error, you know. So I'm just going to say some of the things that faced me, and I called, and a group of, I was going to put about 1 or 2 pages. Some black women took me to lunch and said, "No, you're going to write a chapter, because our young kids coming up do not know anything about raising children." And so I did write a chapter, but I just read parts of it. Facing the world alone to raise children after divorce is a difficult thing to accept. You look at the long years ahead and wonder if you are up to it. There's not a light at the end of the tunnel that you can see. And my good fortune was having a close-knit family who would soon rally around me. And although I had the responsibility of working and taking charge of my kids, my family was there every step of the way. Of course, I have great admiration for those young women who take on that responsibility all by themselves, and they don't have people to help them. Anyway, my kids were still young, and I'm going to say some of the little things that tricks of the trade, as they call it, what you do with kids. Let's see here. I found out early, children do not listen to what you say. They watch what you do. And if you got 3 kids, I'm telling you, you can catch them and they're conspiring what they're going to do to mom next. They got a little thing where they have, you know. So contrary to what they say, they also need. So I found out that I had to back up what I said. I made rules and kept them. Contrary to what they say, children want and need discipline. I drew the line on what kind of behavior I would allow in the home, and the children will take advantage of an indecision and weakness of parents.